Most people believe overthinking is a flaw. They call it anxiety, indecisiveness, lack of confidence. They try to stop it, silence it, override it with logic. And when they can't, they assume something is wrong with them. But overthinking didn't appear randomly. It didn't show up because you're weak or broken or incapable of making decisions. Overthinking is a survival response. It's something your system learned to do because at some point being alert mattered, because there was a time when missing something had consequences. So your mind learned to scan, to replay conversations, to anticipate outcomes, to prepare for what might go wrong. And it worked. Overthinking helped you adapt. It helped you stay safe. It helped you avoid mistakes when uncertainty felt threatening. The problem is not that overthinking exists. The problem is that it's still operating in situations where danger is no longer present. Your system never got the update that you're allowed to move forward without analyzing every angle, so it keeps scanning. Not because you don't trust yourself, but because your nervous system learned that vigilance was protection. This is why overthinking increases when something matters, when there's change, when there's opportunity, when there's growth. Your system doesn't interpret those moments as neutral. It interprets them as high stakes. So it activates the response that once kept you safe. And the more you try to stop it, the louder it becomes. Because from the system's perspective, you're asking it to let go of protection without offering safety in return. This is why advice like, "Just stop overthinking," never works. You can't reason the nervous system out of a survival strategy. You have to understand why it's there. And once you do, overthinking stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes information. When overthinking shows up, it's not trying to sabotage you. It's trying to protect you in the only way it knows how. To understand overthinking, you have to stop looking at it as a mental problem. Overthinking doesn't begin in the mind. It begins in the body, specifically in a nervous system that learned it needed to stay alert in order to feel safe. At some point in your life, uncertainty carried weight. Maybe emotions weren't predictable. Maybe outcomes weren't stable. Maybe mistakes were costly. Maybe you learned that being unprepared meant being exposed. So your system adapted. It learned to think ahead, to replay scenarios, to anticipate reactions, to search for the right move before acting. And that adaptation worked. It reduced risk. It increased control. It gave you a sense of stability when stability wasn't guaranteed. Over time, that strategy became automatic. You didn't choose it. Your system did. And because it once kept you safe, it never shut off. This is why overthinking intensifies during moments of growth. Growth introduces unknowns. Unknowns trigger vigilance. Vigilance activates analysis. Not because danger is present, but because uncertainty resembles earlier conditions where thinking ahead mattered. So when you're deciding something important, your system doesn't ask, "Is this opportunity good?" It asks, "Can we predict the outcome?" And when the answer is unclear, overthinking fills the gap. It tries to create certainty where certainty doesn't exist. This is also why overthinking often feels compulsive. Once it starts, it's hard to stop, because the system believes it's preventing something. And the more you tell yourself to relax, the more the system tightens, because relaxation without safety feels irresponsible. Here's the key insight. Overthinking is not about indecision. It's about self-protection. Your system isn't confused. It's cautious. And until that caution is addressed, overthinking will continue to show up whenever the stakes feel meaningful. Not because something is wrong, but because something matters. When you stop treating overthinking as a flaw and start seeing it as a learned response, you finally understand why it doesn't disappear through effort alone. Here's where most people get trapped. They try to solve overthinking by thinking better. They analyze the analysis. They question the questions. They look for the right conclusion that will finally let them relax. And for a moment, it feels like it's working. They land on a decision. They feel a brief sense of clarity. The mental noise quiets, but it doesn't last. Because the relief didn't come from safety, it came from temporary certainty. And certainty is fragile. As soon as a new variable appears, the loop restarts. This is why overthinking feels endless, not because you haven't figured it out yet, but because the nervous system doesn't trust thinking alone to keep you safe. Every time you try to reason your way out, the system hears, "We still need protection," so it keeps scanning. This creates a feedback loop. Uncertainty appears, overthinking activates. Temporary certainty reduces tension. New uncertainty appears, overthinking intensifies, and the cycle tightens. This is also why overthinking often escalates at night. When distractions fade and control decreases, the system goes on high alert. It uses thought as its primary tool, not because it enjoys it, but because it doesn't know what else to use. The mistake most people make here is trying to eliminate the loop. They fight the thoughts. They suppress them. They judge themselves for having them. And that judgment adds another layer of tension, which tells the system, "This really matters. Stay alert." So the loop strengthens. The truth is, overthinking doesn't respond to force. It responds to regulation. Until the system feels safe enough to release vigilance, thinking will remain its weapon of choice. And once you see that, you stop asking, "How do I stop thinking?" You start asking, "What would help my system feel safe enough to stop scanning?" That question changes the direction entirely. When you stop trying to outthink overthinking and start addressing what it's protecting you from, the loop finally begins to loosen. If overthinking is a survival response, then the solution isn't mental control. It's nervous system regulation. Because overthinking doesn't stop when you find the right answer. It stops when your system no longer feels like it has to stay on guard. This is the part most people miss. They look for mental tools, reframing, affirmations, logic. And while those can help temporarily, they don't address the root. Overthinking lives in a state of hypervigilance. So the question becomes, what signals safety to the body? The first signal is slowing without stopping. Overthinkers often believe that if they slow down, they lose control. But slowing doesn't mean freezing. It means reducing urgency without abandoning action. When you move at a pace that doesn't feel rushed, your system starts to exhale. The second signal is grounded presence. Overthinking pulls you into the future, imagining outcomes, consequences, reactions. Grounding pulls you back into the now, not by forcing attention, but by anchoring it, feeling your feet, noticing your breath, letting your body know where you actually are. This isn't about meditation. It's about orientation, helping your system recognize we're here, we're okay, nothing is happening right now. The third signal is self-trust. Overthinking thrives when you don't trust yourself to handle what comes next. So the system prepares in advance. But every time you respond calmly to something unexpected, you teach your system something new. We can handle this without panicking. That lesson matters more than any mental reassurance. And finally, there's permission to be imperfect. Overthinkers often believe the stakes are dangerous, so they try to eliminate them before acting. But when you allow yourself to move forward without certainty and survive the outcome, the system learns we don't need to predict everything. That's when vigilance begins to soften, not all at once, but gradually, because the body learns through experience, not instruction. When safety becomes felt instead of imagined, overthinking no longer has a job to do. When you understand overthinking as a survival response, you stop trying to get rid of it, and that's when it begins to loosen. Because overthinking doesn't need to be defeated. It needs to be replaced. Replaced with experiences that tell your system it no longer has to stay on guard. This is the shift most people never make. They keep trying to silence their thoughts, when what actually calms the system is learning that life can be navigated without constant prediction. You don't stop overthinking by finding certainty. You stop overthinking by proving to yourself through experience that uncertainty is survivable. Each time you act without overanalyzing and nothing falls apart, trust builds. Each time you allow a decision to be imperfect and you remain okay, vigilance softens. Each time you respond calmly instead of reactively, your system updates. And gradually, thinking stops being your primary shield. It becomes a tool again, not a weapon. This is when clarity begins to feel natural, not because your mind is quieter all the time, but because it no longer needs to stay loud to keep you safe. You still think, you still plan, you still reflect, but you're no longer trapped inside your thoughts. You can enter them and leave them, and that freedom changes everything. Because once overthinking releases, action feels lighter, decisions feel cleaner, movement feels possible without needing everything figured out first. You stop waiting for certainty to give yourself permission, and instead, you trust yourself enough to move forward anyway. That's when overthinking stops running your life, not because you eliminated it, but because you no longer need it to survive.